screen advising you that the player's been successful, you've got your ticket into the system, and so on. So it's a simple little application, a little toy application we use. So that's really just to explain how the examples I've shown you relate to a real piece of software. Now, Story Platform for QA has the requirements, stories, scenarios, and test scenarios. There's a process within the tool to export your test scenarios. So let me just show you that very quickly. In Robot Framework on the test module, sorry, in SP.QA in the test module, I beg your pardon, there's like a ribbon arrangement, and you can see the Robot Framework ribbon there, and I've highlighted the Export Robot Test Cases button. When you click on that, you see a screen like this. Now, I've just shown you one scenario to be exported, the example I showed you on the previous screen. Normally, all the scenarios for stories that are locked are available to export. So locking allows you to go, triggers this process, if you like. Now, I can export the stories in Windows or Linux or Macintosh format. I can also use more than one mechanism to get the data out. So I can, what we found very convenient is to use Dropbox to export files into Dropbox accounts. We can also zip these files up and send them through email to you as well, and that works very quickly indeed. But I want to show you how the Dropbox connection works. It's just more elegant, if you like. So, okay, so when I click on the Export Robot Test Cases, and then redirect it to my Dropbox account, which will ask me the question, do I want to authorize Business Story Manager to put files in my Dropbox account? And you accept, you allow that, of course. And then the process happens, and I can't show you a sort of a moving image of how this actually works, but the process, Business Story Manager, Story Platform for QA, places files in your Dropbox directory that you have control over. And in this case, I've exported 4. So this is a listing of what's in the Dropbox directory. Okay. So having done that, I can now go to Dropbox, and personally, I choose to work within my Dropbox account with it to manage my tests and to run my tests and capture results too. So this is an Explorer list of the 4 files in my robot directory. And you can see input ticket.txt is the first one. The 4 zeros, I'm not going to talk about this, but these are sequence numbers that you can use to drive the sequence of test execution if you choose to. But I have input ticket.txt, and that relates directly to the feature input ticket in Story Platform for QA. And the other features, you can see there's a valid login, show my plays, register on Lucky Numbers website. So these are the exported files, but if I show you another directory, in parallel with the exported robot test cases, I have a resources directory, and the scripts reference files in this directory. So these resource files contain the definitions of the keywords used in the test cases themselves. So this is where I connect the test cases directly to the system under test using, in the example I'm showing, WebDriver Selenium commands. So you can see that every test case file, valid login as an example, has a corresponding resource file. So you can see towards the bottom of the list here, valid login underscore resource.txt is the file that contains the definitions of the keywords in the valid login test case file. These are the files that we would edit manually and debug to get our scripts working. You can see also there's at the top of this list there's a common resource that has system-wide and environment-wide kind of definitions. If you're familiar with Robot Framework, you need these to give you some very basic definitions of keywords. And you can also notice that the third file down, lkyte underscore resource, that is an application resource file. So if you like, we provide definitions at 3 levels: at a test case level, at an application level, and then an environment level. So if you recall that schematic of the way that we work with frameworks, these are the 3 levels of resource files that define the keywords. Okay, So here's an example. Let's look at input ticket.txt. So this is the test case file that relates to the feature input ticket. Now there is just one test scenario which generates this test case, and it's not so easy to interpret what's going on in here. But if you look towards the bottom, you can see the heading, the 3 asterisks test cases. 3 test cases, invalid tickets .001, .002, .003. These correspond to the 3 rows of data in our examples, and as you read across each of those test cases, you can see that it uses a template, invalid tickets. Now as you scroll up just before the test cases, there are some keyword definitions, and one of the keyword definitions, in fact the only one that's there, is invalid tickets. That is the template test case for the test cases that are called towards the bottom of the page. And the content of the invalid tickets test case definition corresponds to the calls to those test cases at the bottom of this page. Now you can also see in this file towards the top that every test case will reference the common resource file and a resource file which is unique to this test case file. So this is input ticket.txt. It references resources input ticket underscore resource.txt file. And that's how the structure is applied. So this file we're looking at right now is generated, and usually you would not edit it. You would not change it because it doesn't need to be changed. The editing comes from the editing effort goes towards the resource file which provides the definitions. So you can see in the template it refers to input tickets underscore resource dot input numbers. That is defined in the resource file. So in resource file input ticket underscore resource dot text, there's a keyword definition input numbers, and you can see it takes 5 arguments, and in effect each argument is processed the same way. And you can see if you read across, input text is a Selenium WebDriver keyword, a command. Plays underscore play number 3 is the identifier for a field on the screen in the system under test. It's actually, you could see it, you could track it down in the HTML for the web page you're looking at. And the dollar curly brackets 3 is the 3rd parameter. So in the call to input numbers with the 5 parameters, the 3rd command would put a value into the 3rd field. So input ticket underscore resource.txt, the file towards bottom right, is where we define our keywords and make the connection to our system under test. Now, I could have shown you a Windows environment running robot framework tests, but for our development and testing, we actually use Linux. So I'm just going to show you Linux. Now, Robot Framework works just as well, and I could have demonstrated it just the same on Windows, and I think also on Macintosh architecture as well. We choose to use Linux. So it's not so easy to see, I guess, but to the right, we have a terminal window which we can use to drive the tests. And what you're seeing there on the right, you can vaguely see the green passes, is I've just run the test. So I'm pretty certain I've typed pybot space robot, and in the directory where the robot test cases exist, and the test would run. So on the right is the command line window, and on the left is the system under test. Okay, and in this case the tests have all passed. And at the end of the robot test, you can see the output. There are 3 files usually produced. An output file, which is XML. It's the raw data of the log itself. There's a log file, which is an HTML web page, which you can open and query. And a report file as well, which has a summary, if you like, of the test as a whole. So let's just move and just see what the robot actually produces. This is the log file. And you can see, in this case, all the tests have passed. Towards the left in the blue you can see links which refer to the 4 test cases that we've actually executed, and you can see within each of those there are multiple test cases run within each test case file. As you scroll down the report, you can go down to every single keyword execution and look at the status of each. And it's a very handy way of debugging your tests to use the robot test log in this way. Now, that's fine and well, but how do I get the content of the output file from Robot Framework back into Story Platform for QA? There's a rather boring process, which is part of the way we run our tests, is we provide a service which you can call and post the output.xml file directly into Story Platform for QA. Now I can't really show you that because there's nothing to see. It just does it. It's a single command, and it just injects the content of the XML back into Business Story Manager, Story Platform for QA, and Story Platform for QA matches the output from the Robot Framework test to the requirements, stories, and scenarios in our product. And there are some checks done as well, of course, so you don't accidentally overwrite someone else's tests, that kind of thing. But the XML is used to provide the status of each and every scenario as executed by Robot Framework, and that's the feedback process happening. Now in Story Platform for QA, when we can look towards the right of the Robot Framework ribbon, there's a scenario test status. It's the last button on the ribbon. Clicking that will show you your list of scenarios and show you the status of each. Now in this case, you can see that each of the scenarios has a pass against them, and to the right there's a link to the detailed content of the test execution log itself. So if I imagine I clicked on the View Test Detail, you get a dialog box which pops up and presents the detailed output from Robot Framework. And you can see for this scenario in particular, valid tickets, which passed, you can see the series of steps, the start and end time. There's a keyword-based tests. The test step, you can see there's a resource valid login, a valid login keyword defined in the application resource file. So there's valid login, go to play, input numbers, input bonus number, input number of plays, submit numbers, numbers are good, submit play at home page. And you can see each one of those steps has a pass against it, which is very convenient for me, of course. Okay, so that's how the process, the loop in the process is closed. So we can now report the status of tests against scenarios, stories, features, and requirements as a whole. Now pretty much that's the whole process end to end, and what I've tried to show you is a walkthrough from requirements on the top left of this picture down through the test execution of the system under tests in the bottom right and back again. Okay, so what we can now do and demonstrate using free services and products how you can capture requirements, stories, scenarios, automated tests, and provide that traceability back from tests back to requirements. Okay, so in summary, SP.QA and Robot Framework combined support requirements of any complexity because there's a requirements management module which is not so sophisticated but provides all the core features of a requirements management product. You can capture priorities, you can create the hierarchy of requirements, it stores a change history of every requirement so you can see who changed what and when. So beyond that, SP.QA implements this keyword-driven approach to test automation. So Robot Framework picks up those keywords defined in scenarios in SP.QA, and by adding the keyword definitions in your resource files, you can connect the business-oriented tests directly to software in your application under test. I've shown you Selenium, Selenium/WebDriver kind of library, but there are many other libraries. There are at least, I think there are about 12 or 13 now, libraries to test different technologies. Now the acceptance-driven approach is traceable from requirements to tests and back, And we can automate story acceptance and regression testing. We can work with developers and drive their behaviors by defining tests connected directly to requirements. And the whole notion of what we end up with is a set of automated end-to-end acceptance tests with reusable keywords. I haven't shown you how to do that. All I've shown you is story-based test automation. Now, each story references a single feature, typically. But if you have those keywords and the keyword definitions in your resource files, you have the building blocks to create full end-to-end tests of your application. So by having those keywords and reusing what the developers are using in their test automation, you have the building blocks to build more complex and convoluted and comprehensive end-to-end tests. Okay, so just to summarize what I've shown you and how you can access what I've shown you, the website for Story Platform for QA is SP.QA. It's as simple as that. It's a subset of the functionality of Business Story Manager, and it's free to use. This is the homepage for SP.QA. Behind each of the big panels are a collection of screenshots which, with some explanation of how the process works. Essentially, just to it reproduces what I've just shown you now. This is the image gallery, and each of these images can be blown up, and you can see the detail of how requirements are managed, processed, and taken through towards the test automation. So the scope of SP.QA is this. What you get is the requirements module. You can create business stories and scenarios aligned with each requirement. The test scenarios are the more technically oriented tests in tester language as opposed to business language that provide you're closer to the system under test. And the robot framework interface, which I showed you, you can export your test scenarios and recover the output from robot framework test execution and import it back into SP.QA. There are some limitations. It's a free service, but there are limits, of course. We limit you to 100 business stories, so you can have as many requirements as you like and as many test scenarios, but we've put a limit of 100 business stories. We're suggesting this is workable for a small team of 5 users, and you get basically one application, one project, and your 100 stories. So it should be enough to run a very small project and for free, but clearly it's a stepping stone to the full product, which I'll talk about now. Business Story Manager is a much broader, rounded, comprehensive product. So SP.QA is included in Business Story Manager. We have a stakeholder and risk management module, which can do goal networks and risk management. We have an iteration, sprint, and test management module, which can manage Scrum sprints if you use Scrum. There's a dictionary and a library management, so you can upload files, you can define your business rules, terminology, and so on in the dictionary, and have it cross-referenced in the product itself. And there's also role-based access control, so you can manage people's access to stories, to scenarios, to tests, and all the features of the system are controlled that way. There are no limits on what you can use. It's a software as a service product, and essentially we have some packages that we cover, but essentially the price is £1 per user per day. Okay, so that's the end of the talk. Before I go to the questions, I just want to mention that I'm running a session with similar content, a tutorial, at the World Testing Conference in 8th to the 12th of July in Bangalore. So myself and Susan Windsor, my business partner, are presenting 3. I think there might actually be a 4th item that we're contributing as well. But we're certainly providing a tutorial to demonstrate how business stories can be used to define and test software. So it's the business story pocketbook kind of method, if you like, the business story method. We'll do a tutorial which is basically an expansion of what we've just talked about, and I think I'm also doing a keynote on leadership with the test leaders stand-up. So I'm just going to hand over to Nitesh, I think, who is a director of Unicom, who wants to talk over and introduce the conference as a whole, and then we'll come back and I'll answer your questions. Hitesh?
Thanks, Paul. Really enjoyed your session and hope the questions will trickle in shortly. So friends, Unicom is organizing World Testing Conference, and the theme is Next Generation Testing, where we would be covering testing topics that are futuristic, innovative, and visionary. And this is the first of its kind conference in India, where the focus is more around testers than around test processes. So we have an early bird registration that is still on, that would end in 30th of April. And in this conference, we have more than 10 paid workshops. There are over 20 speakers who are coming from different parts of the world. We are also running CXO Power Breakfast, and there are 4 parallel tracks on topics like test leadership, testing in action, test innovation, and emerging technologies. So we will have fantastic topics, extraordinary speakers, and some very relevant hands-on workshops and tutorials in the conferences. So there are special discounts for webinar attendees. So those who want to register for this conference, they can send us an email on support@nextgentesting.org. You can see the email ID on the bottom left-hand corner of the slide that you can see. And as Paul mentioned, Paul and Susan will be coming from England, and they would be in Bangalore for the whole of the week. So you can come and interact with them, discuss anything related to testing, not necessarily just on the topic that you heard from Paul. So Paul is one of the test evangelists, and he has large experience. And like Paul and Susan, we have test experts from various parts of the world also coming in. So come and meet Paul in this conference that is happening at Hotel Lee Meridian in Bangalore, and it's a 5-day event from 8th to 12th of July. So feel free to drop us in. Over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Hitesh. Quite a few questions, which is great. It's always good to recognize that people are alive out there and listening. First, let me just go through them then. The first one, quite a long one. Can the robot framework be applied